librarians. Welcome to episode 257 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 17th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. As I mentioned last week, I'm compiling listener voice messages through the end of January. This month's prompt is Hills I'll Die On. These recordings, along with my conversation with Kelsey Bogan, will be shared on Friday, February 9th. Details are linked in the show notes. If you like to plan ahead, February's prompt is Purchasing Mistakes I've Made. My goal is to always showcase the voices and experiences of school librarians everywhere. I hope you will consider adding your voice to the conversation. I'd like to extend a very special welcome this week to listeners Sara in California, Melissa in Georgia, Melanie in Louisiana, Steve in New Jersey, Candace in South Carolina, Amanda and Kate in Texas, Kristen and Karina in Washington. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at LMS_United, or on Threads. You can find me at School Librarians United, and on Blue Sky at SLU Podcast, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. Last week, I told you about the pre-sale of Amanda Jones's upcoming book, That Librarian. It won't be available until August 27th, but you can order your copy now. And if you use the indie bookseller, Cavalier House Books, in Amanda's hometown of Denham Springs, Louisiana, you will get a signed copy. I've included a link in today's show notes. When you look at the cover of Amanda's book, you might recognize the Freedom Fighter shirt that she's wearing. She reached out to the designer Christy, who then designed a line of That Librarian apparel, as well as That Librarian flair, such as a bag, sticker, and mug. I love that we can all be that librarian who advocates for our library and our students' access to books. You will find a link in today's show notes as well. Please know 15% of the proceeds goes to the Texas Library Association, as that is the home state of the designer. Be sure to listen to episode 224. I announce a sponsorship with Literati Book Fairs. And now is a chance to hear from one of Literati's Book Fair veterans, Caroline. Welcome back to the podcast.
Good to be here.
So, Caroline, we've established you've been a loyal Literati customer for at least a year and a half now. Customer service is something that strikes fear in the hearts of so many people because all too often when we have to deal with customer service, it is a really sort of drawn out and unpleasant experience. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to call Literati's customer service?
Well, surprisingly, I had a very wonderful experience with them, with the customer service. So I don't normally take books from the book fair, but I did this, like my most recent fair I did, because I wanted to give each teacher in my school a book to say thank you for all you do, because like they do a lot. So I put them on the register, I scanned them, and it was showing the tax. And it said, oh, the tax will be automatically removed, but it wasn't. And so I was like, I couldn't figure it out. My volunteer couldn't figure it out. We're like, we're going to have to call customer service. So I called customer service and no one answered. And I left a message and hung up. And I'm going to be honest, Amy, I thought, they're never going to call me back. I'll have to work it out myself. And then within not even 5 minutes, within just a minute or two, they called me back. And they were so nice and so professional. And they're like, oh, you just need to swipe left. And I swiped left and the tax disappeared. And it was fantastic. I cannot praise them enough. That's how customer service should work. You should call, they should solve the problem, and they should be nice about it.
Thank you so much for letting us know. Carolyn Carr, I appreciate you coming on the show.
Anytime.
Tune in to learn all about Literati and their very generous offer. Librarians who book their very first Literati Book Fair for this upcoming school year and mention the code UNITED when booking may qualify to receive a $500 gift card to Titlewave. Visit the link in today's show notes and call the Literati team to see if you qualify. And now a word from our sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I am so excited to be working with them. I'm also grateful to Capstone for their continued commitment to support the podcast in Season 6. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for today's episode, Building a Brand, and my conversation with Susan Ballard and Sara Kelly-Johns. Friends, I'm so excited. Susan Ballard, Sara Kelly-Johns, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, glad to be here.
Great to be here.
I was so fortunate to meet both of you during AASL 23 in Tampa last October at the celebration of your book, Elevating the School Library, Building Positive Perceptions Through Brand Behavior. Congratulations on the launch of your book.
Thank you. We're excited about it.
Thank you.
Well, and it was a fun party.
And it was a fun party.
At a great location. We were at the aquarium in Tampa, which was wonderful.
Right now, reflecting on what a warm, lovely autumn day, an evening it was in Tampa. Right now, It's about 1 degree outside. I know you all are out in, New York and New Hampshire. It's not warm either.
Correct. No, sir.
Yes, the conference was wonderful. Your book launch was wonderful. Anytime you want to hand me a glass of wine and toast your book, I will do that.
Okay. Well, I think this is going to be the book for us.
Well, and forgive me, but you two have been friends for a very long time. I'm sure you've collaborated on many, projects. This is your first book that you've written together?
It is. Yes. Yeah, it is. And as we worked through it, we found out that our backgrounds are much more similar than we could imagine. I live near the Canadian border. Susan is south of me, the deep south of New Hampshire.
The deep south of New Hampshire.
We both had we both went to Catholic high schools. We both had the same nuns, mercy nuns, no mercy nuns.
No mercy. No mercy.
We decided that our husbands are so similar that in the dedication to the book, we called them Frogger, Frank and Roger.
Oh, there you go. Yes. Excellent. Well, and forgive me, but you are both incredibly accomplished. You are like library royalty. I know that you have crossed paths throughout your amazing careers. Would you please introduce yourself? I feel like there's a Lifetime Achievement Award in order because truly...
That's very nice of you to say.
Yes, your CV is extensive. Your leadership roles that you've had, you are accomplished. And I just feel like, this is an opportunity for you to shine a light on the things for which you are most proud. How about we start with Sara?
Well, let's see. Where do I start? I got involved in school library organizations after going through a very traumatic situation in the school I was working with, where my budget got cut 40%, where other people got 25% because it wouldn't affect the curriculum. And then the same principal became a superintendent and cut the second person in a library that served 1,250 kids. And so I found out that getting involved with school library organizations let me talk to people who knew what I was talking about, who could help solve some of my problems, and I could help them. And I've been involved on the regional, state, national level for a very long time. But it was when I went to Lake Placid School that I was actually able to go to a conference and be involved. And Susan and I are both past AASL presidents. And I think one of the most interesting years in our life was the year that we were both on the AASL executive committee together. And as I was past president, Susan was coming in as president-elect because there were changes to be made, and they weren't always easy. I've been involved in ALA Council since about 2006, and June 2024 will be my last council session. I had to stay through the reorganization. Probably the professional achievement that I'm most proud of is being involved as educational leadership chair for the state organization, NIWA Sizzle, which I've done since 1991.
And friends, for those of you who are not following the alphabet soup, could you, what is it is the New York
Library Association section of school librarians. And it was an ad hoc task force. It became a committee to provide national level professional development during the summer and related to the AASL standards. And so it started off with 1998. No. It started out with with information power revisited, but it was also providing leadership training and bringing in national level speakers. If there was an introduction of the standards, they happened there. Susan presented for us. We actually presented together after the most recent standards, and sometimes it was Barbara Stripling. Sometimes last summer was Tom Bober. And so I've been doing that for a long time. And it's made a difference for a lot of people. It was to develop leaders, not bring leaders together. And that's probably what I'm most happy about having done for my career.
I'm just sitting here in awe. How about you, Susan? I know that you guys have again crossed paths many times, but I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey as a school librarian.
Oh gosh, well, it's parallels Sarah's in many ways. But I started off as a middle school librarian, and in a way, I still consider myself a middle school librarian. I love that age group. I loved working with them. But I was also the very first librarian hired by the Londonderry School District way back in the day. And it was me, and they told me I was going to be a middle school librarian. And then when I got there, I found out, you also have oversight for our 2 elementary schools. So I had a library assistant in each of the schools. I was 23 years old because I went straight from undergrad, right? I knew I wanted to be a school librarian, so I went straight to graduate school. And it was a real learning experience for me. I spent 35 years in the Londonderry School District, 35 years. And when I left, we didn't have a high school. We didn't have kindergarten. And when I left, I guess I kind of grew with the school district. It was a fast-growing kind of, it's in southern New Hampshire, became kind of almost a suburb of Boston to a degree. And by the time I left, I was the district director. And we had a high school with 3 librarians and 3 paras. And we had a middle school with 2 librarians and 3 paras. And we had 3 elementary schools that all had school librarians with paras, 2 paras. And I thought this is, and we won the National School Library of the Year award in 2000. For small school district. And so we made a great deal of progress in that time, and it was a very, very supportive community. So I have to appreciate that, that they were willing to kind of take leaps along the way. So, but I still have that affinity for middle school. And like Sara, over the years, I also was able to teach at the graduate level. I've had some fun experiences working at Rutgers with I stepped in and filled the role for Ross Todd when he was on sabbatical once, and that was a fun thing to do because he's such a legend. And I got to work with people. I also taught at Simmons, which is my alma mater, and I taught for UVM and a few other places as well. So I love teaching graduate level students, but I have to say, the last time I taught, it was in the online environment, and I find that extremely intense, extremely intense. It was fun. I enjoyed it, but I have to say, I'm glad I stepped away from it because as we all know, online is a complete different game than face-to-face, and you're on 24/7. And it was very intense. I don't, if you're going to do it correctly. My friend Sara still teaches online for Syracuse, and I know she does it correctly. So I know what she puts into it because as she's teaching while we're writing the book, it was intense. As Sara said, too, I've been past president of AASL. I was president of my state association and president of the New England School Library Association. And over the years, all of that has kind of brought me to many places and met many people. I think the best thing about being ASL president was getting to travel, to meet with the state affiliates or chapters, as they're called now. And as Sara well knows, during my year, I got to go to Alaska. And I went to Valdez, Alaska, which is, if you don't know it, it's considered their bush location. Alaska rotates their conference. They go to Fairbanks, they go to Anchorage, and they go to I'm missing one of them, another big, maybe Sitka, and then they pick a bush location. So I got to go to the bush location, and it snowed, and I'm not kidding you, 62 inches in 3 days in Valdez, and I am 60 inches tall, and I was a little worried. But that was my favorite experience of all. The Alaska school librarians, who are a division of their state association, are just wonderful people, and I still have connections with them. Terrific opportunities to travel and meet other school librarians and realize we really have all the same kind of universal concerns when we think about it. And that was another reason that Sara and I felt comfortable kind of deciding to write based on those similar experiences and the things that we all go through as school librarians. Even though there are variations on a theme, no matter where you are in the country, when it all comes down to it, we all want to do better. We all want the school library to be a place where people feel comfortable coming, and we want them to succeed, and we want them to evolve with the times so that they're still here 1,000 years from now.
Wow. I want to bounce back to Sara for a second because we mentioned the teaching component because while you are not in the library still, you are still actively teaching pre-service school librarians. So can you tell us a little bit about your past, and present as an instructor of this next generation of school librarians?
I have found it absolutely absolutely gratifying, but absolutely time consuming. I started teaching as an instructor for undergraduates at SUNY Plattsburgh, which is the closest university. And that was very interesting. I always said it's my paid professional development. I was a 6-12 librarian my entire career. And so, of course, my seniors became freshmen just weeks after they graduated. So it really gave me a view as to what they should be learning. And I really like the fact that college students understood my sarcasm, but more than my sixth graders. But my favorite grade was sixth grade also. I was a 6-12 librarian. And then I kind of morphed into teaching online for Mansfield University School Library and Information Technologies with, and Joyce Valenza was there, part of that. It was all school library practitioners, Deb Cockle, a lot of really good people. That program got sunsetted. That's a whole long story. And have you got an hour? But then Barbara Stripling asked me to take over Literacy Through School Libraries course for her at Syracuse when she became the dean of the school library program and then emeritus. And I have always done anything Barbara Stripling asked me to do, and vice versa. That's how she became president of the New York Library Association, and while she was still in New York City. So right now I have 25 students. It's maxed out. And I wish I could say that they were all in the school library track. They're not. I had one class this past summer that were New York City teachers and school librarians in the Teacher to Librarian program. It's an IMLS grant. And that was so interesting. I didn't have to give them a quick course in what AASL standards are, or what ISTE standards are, or the ESIFC Information Fluency Continuum, because the first thing my students have to do are lesson plans. And these are public librarians. I had one prison librarian, music librarian, archivist. My students have to create a literacy portfolio that is, it's not required by Syracuse, but it's extremely useful when they have to do evaluations, when they have to go for promotion to get a job, a lot of them. And it's not always the school librarians that I teach that use that literacy portfolio. They have to, it's for the ones that are teachers, their struggle is to design a program as a librarian. It really helps them transition into working collaboratively.
I love that. I was struck right away by the quote you included in your book, that the quote is, "Your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room." And, it really, I loved reading your book. I mentioned this on social media, but I read it while I was flying on the plane. It's one of my favorite places to read. And I'm sitting there having these thoughts. And it's like, it sounds like everybody needs to consider, especially school librarians, what our brand is, especially because, as you point out, we have to deal with some really hardened stereotypes that people have regardless of their generational. I mean, this is across multiple generations. How people perceive what a school librarian is really is something that we can't ignore.
No, you can't ignore it. And that Jeff Bezos quote, well, reportedly Jeff Bezos said that. Sarah and I were vigilant as we quoted people to make sure we were able to cite the source. And we found that Jeff Bezos was said to have said this by numerous people, but we could never find the actual document or resource. So we being good citation people, we said reportedly he said this. But it is a great question. You think about it. You don't want to be the person when you walk into the teacher's room, everybody stops talking because they're discussing that there's a problem with you. And that Jeff Bezos quote struck us immediately, that your brand is what people say when you're not around, how they perceive you. And so you always want to think, what's the worst thing that people are thinking about me out there? A really reflective practice means at the end of each day, thinking about, how'd the day go? Did I offend anyone? Did I cause trouble to anyone? Is there a need? And I'm serious. I think people should be ready to do that. And if you were short with a teacher or short with a kid, or you couldn't be bothered with something, the next day or the next day after that, go and say, sorry, I cut you off. I didn't mean to do that. You need to do brand repair all the time and maintenance. So you can't just think, oh, people will get over it, because they don't. They don't. I remember once coming into one of the school libraries, and this was before we had hired a school librarian at all the elementary schools. And so there was a para there, and she had just insulted a teacher. She didn't mean to, and the teacher was on her high horse. Sometimes teachers are having a bad day, and they're very privileged persons, and they can kind of be or talk in a demeaning way to someone that they feel is lower on, in the pecking order. But the teacher walked and said, I'll never come to this library again. And I knew the teacher meant it. What did that mean? We didn't care if the teacher came back, honestly. She was kind of a, difficult person. But that meant that 25 kids weren't going to come to the library ever again. So we had, the parent and I sat down and thought, what can we do to make sure that we soothe this teacher's feelings, that we make sure she understands she's important, her kids are important, we want them to come back. And so, hat in hand, the next day, the para and I both went to the teacher and said, yesterday, can we have a do-over? Can we have a do-over? We didn't mean it. And it worked. The teacher came back. She and the para mended fences. They became good friends, and life went on. Now, does that happen all the time? No, it doesn't, because life gets in the way. You get busy. You don't. But I wish it would, especially with school librarians. You are the only one of your kind, of your species in the building, and you cannot afford to be unliked.
Something that occurred to me is when I look at how many times I engage with our teachers, and then I break that down by how many of those engagements are in person, face-to-face, and then recognize that the majority of those engagements are actually online, where nuance is lost, where context is lost, where tone is lost. And when I realize that most of my engagements with my teachers doesn't happen face-to-face, you have to be even more cognizant of how you're coming across in that email. Oh my gosh.
Yes, exactly. As we begin, for your listeners, before we began this podcast, Amy went through this is what's going to happen with Sara and I. And one of the things we're doing is we are visually looking at each other. We can see one another on this podcast, though you won't see us, thankfully, because you don't want to see what gravity and time has done to my face. But we can see one another, and we do get that nuance, and we can recognize what we're talking about. And you are so right, Amy, that doesn't necessarily happen in this increasingly digital world. So you have to think about it. Words matter. Words matter, tone matters, and you just want to be as vigilant as possible. And I know, what's the most difficult is, why do I have to do that? Why don't the teachers do it in return? I don't know. I don't know why that is. It's just that you have to be the bigger person. And that's all that it boils down to. It's, that's it. And I'm sure Sara has something to say on the subject too.
Oh, yeah. It's the people that you don't know you offend that are the ones that keep you awake at night. But I learned a long time ago that one-on-one communication is by far the best. I also learned very early on that sometimes you can take something in an email that someone says as a joke and get very, very upset. Is when I actually started using a little emojis and exclamation points and learned that, read your emails over. And text. Oh my gosh, text right now. I mean, I text with my students. It's like, okay, it's not just autocorrect that makes mistakes. Sometimes it's me, and sometimes it's them. So I have learned to say, is that what you mean? is, is that what you mean? I'd want to make sure we're on the same page, because we talk in the book about transactions, that every time you interact with a student, a teacher, an administrator, a parent, a community member who knows you work in the library, it's a transaction. And if those transactions are a little bit below what you want, that's your brand. That contributes to your brand.
You are making memories for people. Every time you encounter that, you're making a memory for them. And you want that memory to be positive, always positive. And again, if it's a negative, think about how you can do something to turn it around, because ultimately it will be make things better for you and for others, I think.
I'm thinking about what my mother used to say, you never get a second chance to make a first impression.
Right.
Doesn't everybody's parents say that?
Oh, yeah. And my mother was fond of the too late is forever. So, sometimes if you're too late doing something, the damage is done and you can't undo it. So that one sticks with me all the time.
I was reading in chapter 2, lessons from the business world. And friends, my own business acumen is really limited to the summers I did retail in high school and in college. But you mentioned something about perpetual beta. And I was like, okay, perpetual beta is something I would like you to explain and how it is relevant to us and our brand.
That's a chapter I wrote. We alternated chapters, and some we did together.
Well, I want to. We each took a responsibility for a chapter, but then somebody do the writing, and then both of us would go over it and modify it. So, because I have to give Sara credit for making my chapters better than when I started them. And I think she should do likewise.
Absolutely, because one of the things that really I think made our book successful is that we read them to each other. It's a good thing out loud. And if we missed something or wanted to add a nuance, that came in. But when I started really with the good to great, the Jim Collins good to great, and then where he talks about leadership. And I went into the level 5 leadership, which was something he found as he looked at what makes a business great. He found out that those 5 levels of leadership really came out over and over and over again. So I really was pretty fascinated by that. But then we got involved with user design, UX, and that's used by marketing and business people, but we found that it's also used by educational associations, often at the university level. And so you dig deep because I research better than I write, but and I've done more of it over the years. But then I discovered the Morville's honeycomb, and that is something. The Morville's honeycomb is how to look at a website you are designing, how to look at your users, what is it that they want, and that's on page 13. And then I started, users, honeycomb, and school libraries, and that's when I discovered the Suzanne Sandwald article that I had read in 2017 and enjoyed. And Suzanne had worked in the corporate world. She was involved. She's a librarian in San Diego, and I hope to meet her in person when I go there for our ALA annual. But she was in UX, user design, and looked at what she did in her library from her students' point of view, from the teacher's point of view, the faculty point of view, but especially the students. And for instance, when you're involved in setting up signs, because you can't interact with every student who's trying to use the printer in your library. But any signage for that needs to not be written for the person who read the user's manual, but for the student using it and using it successfully. And so she had 5 suggestions for how to make our libraries work right for our users. Listen to yourself, listen to your users, be explicit, avoid being overly explicit, but start your perpetual beta now. Watch your students using that printer. Watch your students searching online. Watch your students looking at a database article and then moving to another article. And then at some point, as Susan said, reflective evaluation, how's it going? How's it going? And what can I improve? So it's, that sign that you make for the printer or the copier doesn't stay there for 15 years, maybe 3 months, maybe not quite the whole year, but you're just constantly evaluating your success from your student point of view.
I will say, for those of us with laminators, the sign has not needed to change because the VHS tape that helps me fix my laminator, the laminator is not only older than all of my students, it's older than some of my colleagues. And so, yes, friends, the VHS tape that I still have demonstrates is my proof positive that actually we're going to keep that sign on there. It doesn't matter. Nothing's changed. But yes, we're perpetually in beta. We are always, and as people who have professionals who constantly are doing this self-reflection, I don't get to my car before I'm already reflecting on my day and making those changes. So I know you're talking to a very friendly audience when it comes to being perpetually in beta. Chapter 3 is a favorite of mine because it talks about service culture and why we should all take a lesson from customer service at Nordstrom's. and I appreciate that many of us have not gone into a mall recently, but there once upon a time was a time when Nordstrom's came to the rescue. And I love this analogy because it reminds me that we are dealing with a service culture. And when my students and my teachers walk in, it's, what can I do for you today? What can I do for you today? And I don't know how many teachers greet their students like that, but that's how I greet everybody.
As we should. And again, Nordstrom is kind of became our beacon because they have legendary service culture. I mean, the stories about, buying something at Nordstrom in 1962 and returning it in 2002 exist out there, that they will take things back. A man returned a tire to a Nordstrom once, even though we know that Nordstrom's doesn't sell tires, but apparently there had been a tire store in the location previously, and the man knew that's the location he bought the tire, and he wanted to return it, and they took it back, and they refunded his money because he told them how much he had spent on it. And that was because, and their perspective is, they have customers for life. And that's how we need to think about students and teachers, and we want them to be customers for life, not just one transaction, as Sara mentioned, how we interact with people. All those transactions should be as though they're going to be here from forever. And the other thing about Nordstrom is it doesn't matter if you were a printer or a popper when you walk into that store. You could walk in there looking like like the proverbial bag lady, and they, can we help you? Or, His Highness, whomever, could walk in there and they get the same level of service. That is, to me, defines customer service, that it doesn't matter who you are, we're here for you. And we know that we have all kinds of kids, all kinds of teachers. We shouldn't judge them. We should just know that they're here to interact with us and to use our services, and we want them to feel welcome. And I also want to kind of cycle back to the business world and using examples from the business world. One of the things that was a tremendous eye-opener for me and caused me to now spend as much time looking in the business section of a bookstore as I do at looking at the children's books or the YA books was a little book called Our Iceberg is Melting by John Carter. And we also refer to that. And it's about the change management process. And I would recommend it to listeners as something, a quick read. It's a parable. It's a fun read. It's about penguins. Who doesn't like penguins, right? Who doesn't like penguins? It is a fun read, and it takes you through the change process of the lowliest of low penguins, understanding that there was a problem and getting the hierarchy of penguins to recognize it and work to resolve it. And many times, as school librarians, we sit at the center of our schools, the crossroads of the curriculum, and we can see issues happening. And we need to be on the alert and be prepared to kind of guide our schools through a change process by knowing who to talk to and saying, I've been seeing this. I wanted to bring it to your attention. And what can I do to help? And it's in that way, I think we exert our leadership in a quiet but influential way. We don't need to have, leadership here, arrows bursting out all over the place. I think people recognize leaders because they want to follow them, not because you proclaim yourself as a leader. And so leadership is so important in our profession. Our standards tout it all the time, but you do not have to be, a shining rock star to be a leader. You just need to be solid in your practice and that people believe you and you have credibility.
I totally agree. And I'm so glad that you've mentioned so much of the research that you two did and crossing into that business world, because you've provided an amazing recommended reading in your appendix. Friends, I was like, oh, wait, I can go in the back. And all of a sudden you have all these amazing things that you have done to support the practices that school librarians are doing with some rather unexpected sources in the business world. And I love that because you've provided all of these. And I love cross-referencing into an appendices. And you did this fantastic job for us because, again, you're touching on something I know precious little about, but you're making it relevant to my job and supporting me in a way that I really feel is relevant. I love Chapter 4 because you called upon the expertise and perspectives of so many school librarians in the field who, and listeners will recognize, have all been on this show. So, friends, I don't want to leave anybody out.
Where do you think we got our list, Amy? No.
I know. Well, listen, I got to tell you, Tom Bober, Pam Harland, Dr. Heather Morfield-Lang, Diana Rendina, and Ali Shoup. They have all been on this show. And I'm like, wait, I'm like recognizing these and I love that you've called upon these other school librarians because they're in the trenches, as it were. They're working day in and day out as working either with school librarians or educating them. And it really does make this conversation so much more, broad, but also speak to the people who deal with this every day.
That's true.
Well, if you need to recruit people to do future podcasts, you have a list in that Chapter 4. We know one of the two of us or both of us know every person in that list. But we worked very hard. We know a lot of people, but we worked really hard to be geographically diverse, ethnically diverse, large school,
gender,
small school, in the stick school, in the middle of New York City, gender. We were conscious about that. We just wanted to be as diverse as we could be with people that we knew had a strong school library brand. How did you do it? What do you do to maintain that, to make it sustainable what do you do to grow it? And we wish we could have used every single response that we got back, because there wasn't a bad one anywhere. Yeah, we really had to cut that chapter.
Right. Well, we tried to, Sarah, but our editors wouldn't let us.
Well, and especially because this chapter focused on sort of the difference between building our library brand and building our personal brand. And this is where I'll be very forthcoming. When it comes to building a brand, the one I know about is a personal brand, because it's the brand of my podcast, because that's been consistently mine for the past 6 years. I can't say that about my job. So I've not had a brand to build in terms of a library brand. The job I had before the one I have right now, I actually taught 9 schools in 7 years, 4 at a time. So no, I didn't get around to building that library brand because there were 9 libraries.
Right. You cannot do it in those circumstances, right?
No, I sort of focused on the podcast brand, and that was it. So I love that these are people who could speak to how they make sure that there is attention being given to and again, the difference between your library brand and your personal, what you would consider like your professional brand.
One of the things, though, is that you do have a professional brand. You haven't thought about it yet. But it's again, that self-reflection. And the frustration is when you work really hard to do your job, to benefit your users, to bring them, to help them learn gradually, and then you leave for one reason or another, and it's not sustained. So that is definitely part of brand development, is that when you walk out, whether it's for another job, retirement, a different position in your state school, does that library stay where it was in terms of the user experience, the benefit to your school community? Does it stay the same? It's not just you. That's the difference between personal. It's not just you. It's your library. School librarians for a long time bristled at being thought of as support or a service culture. And Susan and I did discuss that as we wrote, and we decided that was what we had to focus on. We provide service culture, and that service culture is strong and continues and it's continuous. It's not just me.
When I changed jobs 3 years ago, and somebody said, "Oh, what's your elevator pitch? Do you have your elevator pitch?" I was like, "Okay, it's 2 words: support everyone."
Exactly.
There we go. and that is my elevator pitch. 2 words. I got it. It might surprise listeners to know that brand building also includes a lot of data collection and lots of observations. And I'm hoping that you can give us an idea of what kinds of things, hint about those things that you discuss in this chapter.
Well, I just love observation and data collection. It's my jam, I guess. And I know that when I was a district director, there were times I think some of the school librarians were ready to, have a revolution with pitchforks and torches and come after me, because I'd say that I want you to do this. And I think that when we first started, we created a level of collaboration rubric after one of the iterations of the AASL standards, because collaboration was becoming more and more important in the instructional role of a school librarian. And we knew we weren't doing it to the extent that we should be. And, you just can't go up to a teacher and say, "Want to collaborate?" As a friend of mine once pointed out, as she went up to a teacher once and was desperate to collaborate with them. And they said, what makes you think I'm not doing a good job on my own? So think about, that too. So you have it's a delicate balance to try and maintain. So I asked the school librarians, please use this level of collaboration rubric. Let's just do it for a month for the classes that you're coming into. And they told me in no uncertain terms they didn't want to do it. What do you think? We've got to do all these other things. Where do you think we're going to find? It's always time. How are we going to find that time to do this? And I finally said, okay, I'm putting on my epaulets and I'm showing you the stripes I have on my sleeve because I am higher in the pecking order here, and you're just going to do it. I expect it to be done. And that usually was my style of management, but I thought it was that important. Well, at the end of the month, they were stunned, and I was stunned with what we found out. And we were able to see that we had teachers who we were not doing anything with all the way up to, people we were doing really wonderful work with. And we were able to take that to a principal who was one of our best champions and say to her, look at this. And she had an outstanding school librarian. Look at this. Isn't this she was stunned. We were doing that librarian was doing fully collaborative work with the PE health teachers, but not the science teachers. And I'm not saying that PE health teachers don't have but they got the fact that their students needed something when the science teachers refused almost. We are too busy in our lab and that we haven't got the time. So the edict that I gave the school librarians, you must do this, the principal gave her teachers an edict. You will, each one of you, before the end of this school year, do a collaborative unit involving the school librarian, and you will be evaluated on it. Now, that's commitment, and that changed everything. Because the teachers were not happy, but then when they saw what their kids got out of it, they fully committed. And so we went to a model that provided across the district, every class had an opportunity to have an assured collaborative experience with the school librarian at least once a year. Because you can't do it 24/7, but you can do it once a year with every kid, with every teacher.
But forgive me, doesn't this sort of come back to this idea of, going back to pre-service, training of our pre-service teachers, and more especially to our leadership programs that are offered for these aspiring soon-to-be administrators? At what point in their training were they told that part of your program is to collaborate with the school librarian? Because unfortunately, so many of our graduating teachers are going to schools that don't have school librarians, or our administrators are working in a building that has media techs or librarian technicians, and they don't have certified school librarians. And so their experience hasn't been one of, in my last school, we had this amazing person who helped us do X, Y, Z. So, I think that there are so many things that can be, achieved if we start to make that more part of everyone's preparation. But I want to make sure, when you realize that data is something that librarians use to secure our jobs, when we have to make sure our administrators see the value, sometimes the only thing the administrators see are those numbers. It's the stats. It's the
bean counters love numbers.
Absolutely. And if you're going to give a synopsis of what you've done by month by month, those breakdowns are oftentimes valued more if the administrator looking at them can simply look at how those numbers are growing and take a look at numbers that now I say, now you can quantify the value of my school librarian.
And you can also have testimonials, as we talk about on your website, of people who've gone through the process of doing something with the numbers that said this made a difference instructionally. This made a difference in my learning. So those anecdotal things that come out as a result are also very, very important. And the other thing we talk about in this chapter is observation, just watching how do people want to use the library? Not how you've set it up, but how do they want it to work? The old rule, only 4 at that table. And then at the end of the day, there's 20 chairs at that table. So clearly they're saying they want to work in big groups. So those are things that you take. It's not by happenstance that the only Barbie I have is Jane Goodall. I have a Jane Goodall Barbie here, and I asked for it as a gift because I am a fan of Jane Goodall, who's just observation made her understand a community of chimpanzees, and observation can help us understand our communities too. I would say I wish I had a blind to go in and watch, because you learn so much just from watching how people want to use something, as opposed to the way we've been. This is what a library should look like. Who says?
Absolutely. It doesn't sound creepy at all. I'm going to sit here and just watch them. How's they engage?
You don't want to put binoculars.
Yes, but again, a real easy example right now is I've got a lot of students who want to show each other the videos on their phones, and they're playing them out loud to show their friends, and I'm struggling because I work in a space that I describe as feels like an airport terminal with sort of 20 feet or 30 feet ceilings. Yes.
I've seen pictures of your...
It's a beautiful space.
It's a beautiful
Echoes
facility.
like a son of a gun. So...
Yeah, I imagine.
There's just...
Something.
It is really... the voices carry, the sound carries, door slamming carry, everything carries. And so really trying to find a way to support everybody in the needs. I've got students who want to eat in that space. And that's another struggle. I don't have an answer. I'm still working on it with my administrators, because I have students who are getting to school late and they missed the breakfast pickup that ended before they got. It's like, we're trying to find solutions because the kids are coming to us with needs, and they're ones that we hadn't anticipated. So I was so excited to see a regular guest on the podcast, Dr. Steve Tatro, in Chapter 6, and talking about how our policies and our spaces really can impact our brand building efforts.
There's no question about that. I first started following Steve Tatro on Knowledge Quest, the Knowledge Quest blog post, and then I started, of course, picking him up on social media. And he is reflective. He does observe, but he's also ready to change day to day if he needs to. And that is what makes the difference. He's got a teaching background, but he really wants to be in the library, and he really wants that library to benefit his students. So if there's a change to be made, go for it. Go for it. Maybe you do want to allow students to eat in your library, to have snacks in your library, as long as they pick up after themselves. No food fights. And, there's a lot of things that can happen in a library that take you aback for a minute. It was when I watched I could hear a little bit of giggling over in one of those blind areas in the library. And I realized there were 2 6th graders sitting on the floor, but they were reading to each other. And they were, and like, what? This, you have to sit at a table kind of thing? No. They hadn't checked with me first, but I can allow that kind of interaction. My library doesn't have to be silent. My library, listen to me, my library. The library doesn't have to be silent, but the library has to be quiet enough that other people can get their work done. So courtesy is something that matters.
I struggle between our and my, and I've recognized it is our library. It is our library, but it is a place that is complete. It is so high maintenance, and I mean maintenance in terms of like keeping it a space that everybody wants to be in, and the maintenance of it is mine. And unfortunately, when it comes to we are literally the custodians of the largest classroom in the school. And I mean that both in terms of like cleaning up and making sure that it is a place that everybody wants to be. It is under our care. And it is so easy for us to fall into that because we invest so much of our personal, energy into protecting and making sure that this is a space that people want to be in. I'm next week, we've got midterms and I am on hall duty. Hall duty means, I'm going to be out in the hall guarding the fire alarms because during exams, it has been practiced that somebody has gone out and pulled a fire alarm during midterms. So, we have to keep vigil over our 16 fire alarms that we have around our very large campus. But it is a great time for me to work on updating and maintenance of our school website. And I've sort of saved these. It's over the course of 3 days, I'm going to be out in the halls for about an hour and a half each time. And what I'm going to focus on is updating and refreshing and making sure that our website it reflects the values and the brand that I want our space to have. Would you talk a little bit about that value and just how vitally important it is our website also is consistent in the messaging and that branding that we want?
Susan and I talked about the 3-click rule and the 3-click rule, and sometimes it's 5, but how deep should a parent or a student, but especially a student or a teacher, have to go on your school district website before they find you? And it really does matter. You must make your website crucial for students. How do you do that? Who does go to your website? I have to admit that one of the things that I always had on a website was this teacher's project is going on right now. Here are the resources for that project. This teacher is going to do it. In other words, it pushed out the teachers and the classes, and that way, students are going to it. Parents who want to help their children are going to it, and it connected to their resource. Also, it's got to make it easy for the students to find the resources that they need consistently. You have to have a reason to go there. So not only is it attractive, as attractive as you could make it with whatever software the district requires you to use, but there are parent resources. There are on the front page of your website. They should not have to click 3 times to find them, because they won't. But if they're helping their student with a project, they're helping with their student with a project and they see something for them on your website, that will bring them back there, and that's part of your brand.
Well, I think about like when I first started at my high school 3 years ago, and there wasn't a dedicated drop-down for the Learning Commons. And it wasn't a battle. I simply had to say, excuse me, because, we want to have a tab on that toolbar that just when people scan across, what am I clicking on? And I see a lot of people's library web pages because when I do my own research for this podcast, one of the places that I go to learn something about the person I'm going to interview for an episode is on their school library webpage. And it is interesting how much I can learn from some websites and how much I don't know. Like, I mean, we run the gamut, right? We run the gamut. I appreciated the 9 brand challenges, which you offered in Chapter 7, Extreme Makeover, because it gives all of us an opportunity to consider the many factors which might impinge on our own brand building efforts. And I think this is really valuable to your readers because we have a better sense of trying to imagine how we would go about resolving some of these issues.
I think probably one of the things we tried to do was to think about creating scenarios for people so that they could be involved in it. So we use the personas, some of the personas from the AASL standards, and I give a shout out to Sara, who was on the implementation team. They're the ones who conceived of using the concept of personas in that document, and we decided to use them to create scenarios so that people could kind of have little case studies about how somebody might go about dealing with some of the issues that arise for all of us, whether it's collection development, whether it's budgeting issues, challenges to collections, or the myriad of experiences that we do indeed run across, and that might be a game changer. I can't get over this hump in the road, so I can't work on my brand. Yes, you can. You just need to think it through, and you need to not be afraid to call in for help. Ask people to help you. Connect with your peeps in whether it's in a social media construct, whether it's through your state associations. And I know Sara and I both believe strongly that all school librarians should be member of their state school library associations, and at whatever level of participation you can be at, do it, because it will only bring more back to you. But, ask for help. Let people know what you're struggling with, and ask for the collective hive to kind of help you brainstorm how to resolve this. In our instances, we did have a district supervisor in our book that people, and I know that is a luxury for many people, but surely there is somebody out there that you can say, hey, I'm struggling with this. How might I resolve it? Sara and you could connect with us if you need a little direction. We're not beyond giving help. So without, it's hard to explain the chapter other than that they're scenarios addressing challenges. And if you see yourself in them, I think the more you see yourself, the better able you are prepared to cope with things.
Well, and you've done such a great job of involving the reader in this book. You've offered reflection questions at the conclusion of every chapter. You've included rubrics. You've included checklists and these, case studies for us to sort of work through as a way to address our own challenges. I just think it's very considerate. I like to be drawn in. I love your appendix that you've included and a glossary, because let's face it, anytime we get into a topic such as this, it's been so well researched, you've also provided us with the supports, because it's an education for ourselves when we learn more about what we do through the study that you two have done in this book, Elevating the School Library.
We couldn't write 2 books or 3 books or 4 books. Or have a book that is hundreds and 700 pages long. We had to limit ourselves. So reflective practitioner questions, we thought that was important, because perhaps this book is going to be used for a district's book study. Perhaps you're reading it all by yourself and you say, there are some things I'm doing right. I didn't even know I was doing them right, or that they were important. But they're like in the Extreme Makeover chapter, it's good to find the things that you are good at. And, it's like a professional leadership rubric, which I've been involved in writing a few of those. And they it's as important to find out what you're doing right as wrong. But we didn't want to just leave you hanging. Okay, wait a minute, I need a little improvement here. How do I do that? How do I do that? And it's only 170 pages long. So, but we can't solve everybody's problems. We can just give them some solid hints and some directions.
I think you've provided a fantastic resource. Susan and Sara, I can't thank you enough. Here we are on a holiday Monday, and you could be doing any number of things, but apparently staying warm is something we are all dealing with right now, thanks to the weather. I'm grateful that you've taken time out of your day and your busy schedule. Would you please let us know, how would you best be reached if listeners wanted to reach out to you and reflect on this or pose a question to you?
Well, my email, which seems to be out there pretty extensively, is skjohns@gmail.com. But I'm also on social media, and anybody's welcome to send me a message on Instagram or Threads or Facebook. But email will get my attention the fastest.
Excellent. And how about you, Susan?
The same here. And my email is SD, as in David, Ballard, Ballard, @comcast.net.
Friends, I am so grateful. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day. Thank you so much. Congratulations on the success of your book.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, at least there's one happy reader, Amy.
I'm going to guarantee you right now, I was flying and taking notes, and I know that passengers around me were like, wow, that looks riveting. And apparently I was really getting into it because I didn't come up for air for about 3 hours, and it was really fantastic. Listen, I wish you the very best. I hope you have a fantastic a couple months here in the winter. I know our paths will cross.
Okay, absolutely.
Maybe San Diego.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Amy. Love talking with you.
If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. One last friendly reminder, use the code UNITED to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more, and librarians who book their very first Literati Book Fair for this upcoming school year and mention the code UNITED when booking may qualify to receive a $500 gift card to Titlewave. Visit the link in today's show notes and call the Literati team to see if you qualify. The topic of our next episode will be Emotional Support Librarian, and my conversation with Diana Haneski. I hope you will tune in.